Hello, everyone. I'm Craig Stover, Executive Director of Allens Lane Art Center, and welcome to ArtShow. This week I have with me Tish Ingersoll. Hello, Tish.
Hi, how are you, Craig? Good to see
Uh,
you.
Good to see you too. Before we begin, I want to thank everybody for not only tuning in this evening, but a big thank you to those people who made donations to the Art Center. Your contributions and support to the center really help, especially in these very tough COVID times that we have. So thank you very much for all your support. With that being said, again, welcome Tish. Thanks for coming out and lending your voice to ArtShow. I was thrilled to see you here. It's been a while since we had our last conversation. You did have an art show at Allens Lane a while back. It's been a
Yeah,
couple of years now.
yeah, I think it was 2013.
Yeah, it was great. It was the first time we ever did an art show where we recreated a studio wall in the gallery. That was really a lot of fun. So let me begin how I always begin with artists, because I think it's really quite fascinating. How did you get your start in the arts?
Well, a long time ago, my mother was a watercolorist. She had
Oh,
gone to the School for Industrial Art, and I don't remember a time when she wasn't painting. Wherever we were, she had a sketchbook. And when I was young, about 11 or 10, we moved to Switzerland. And my mother exposed us to the arts
hmm.
in Europe. We went to Venice, we went to Florence, we went to France, and I very early on knew I wanted to be an artist. I think I was 11.
Oh,
And we were in Venice. No, we were in Florence at the Uffizi, and there was a painting by Botticelli of the Birth of Venus. And I stood in front of that painting, and I remember clearly thinking, I want to be an artist. I want to make beautiful paintings like this. Um, we lived in Europe until I was 14, and at that time I went to boarding school, and I had two experiences at boarding school that were wonderful. One, first of all, I loved being at boarding school in Maryland, and I had an art teacher right away. We had the art room that we could escape to, and there were three of us classmates who spent a lot of time in the art room. And I also had an English teacher, Miss Aswell, and she let me draw pictures instead of writing essays in the beginning because I was thinking in French at that point because we lived in the French-speaking part of Switzerland. So I was very fortunate because I could not write very good essays. So that was just so helpful to my life from then on. And there were a lot of kids who didn't like boarding school, but I just loved it. I found my niche there. And then I was also the first person in my school to apply to art school instead of Vassar or Radcliffe or whatever. So I went to the Academy of Fine Arts right out of high school.
hmm. Here.
And yes, here in Philadelphia. And I had vowed I'd never live in Philadelphia because I'd lived in Europe and I thought it was great, but I ended up here the rest of my life. So the Academy was, a great experience. 2 years into it, I ended up getting married. That was kind of what was done in those days, at least in my family. And so I ended up having two children, two wonderful children, a daughter and a son. And when they were quite young, I enrolled in the academy again. I had a good friend from the academy who had graduated from the academy who I would draw with during the week. And she urged me to apply again and go back. Her name was Sandra Son. And she lived in Chestnut Hill, and she had a studio in her house, and it was very inspiring. So I luckily applied again to the academy and got in, and I graduated in 1980 and was very fortunate again. My children were Germantown friends, and I continued to paint, and then a woman, Jill Bonovitz, told me, she was a contact at Germantown Friends, that she had a studio that I could share on 4th Street. So I started when the kids went to school full time. I rented this studio on 4th and Brown, and in those days, that part of town was very different from what it is now.
I would imagine.
There was a bagel place around the corner where I would go get my coffee and bagel in the morning after leaving Anna and Andrew off at school. And so I spent a lot of time in the studio. It was a great experience. I started off by showing at the Chuck Moore Gallery right away out of school. And I did mostly still life and mostly in pastel, because pastel came easily to me, and I would use black paper and I would do these very dramatic lightings on the objects. And it was, I had a really good experience there. And then I kind of was branching out, and I wasn't interested in doing still life so much. I was doing cityscapes also, and showing those at Chuck Moore's and doing pretty well. And then, to jump forward, I ended up going to a talk at SIVA, which was then run by Bibi Benalil, who was a cousin through my ex-husband, and went to very interesting talks there, and met Anne Raymond, who was the director of Nexus, which was a co-op gallery and artist-run gallery. And so I got into Nexus, and Nexus was a pivotal point for me, because I wasn't so worried about selling my work, which I was in a commercial gallery. So all of a sudden, the world opened up to me, and I could do whatever I wanted. So I started out doing kind of series of paintings, mostly landscape, which I've always gravitated towards. And in my experiences of being at Nexus, I was able to paint larger canvases. I was able to draw great big things and not worry about selling them, and learning how to hang my own show. And I ended with, and I showed with Chuck we overlapped with Chuck, showing at Nexus and with Chuck Moore for about 2 years. And then I just let go of the commercial gallery, because I wasn't worrying about money that much right then, because my ex-husband was making more. So then, being in Nexus for a while, I ended up applying for some grants and some residencies. And I had my first residency at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, CCA. And I was so nervous going there. I just thought, wait, am I a real artist? I just, I couldn't imagine that I could actually have my own studio with all these other artists around. And they were writers, they were musicians, they were painters, they They were photographers, and it worked out fine. I was only there for 2 weeks, but then I got through SIVA, I got a residency in Barcelona in 1992, and that was one of the first times I'd been back to Europe since I lived.
Let me back up for a minute. So
Yeah.
that was just one question.
Okay.
So right out of school, when you graduated, you established a studio here in Philadelphia?
In 1980.
Okay. And you've had studios in Philly the whole time, or were you ever out of studio?
Since then, yeah.
And where's your current studio?
Oh, we love our current studio. It's in North Philadelphia on Natrona Street, North Natrona. We're off of Oxford. We're right 1 block from Fairmount Park and the driving range and Mount Pleasant. We're up here, and it's really great. It's a very small building. There are about 10 artists in here, and we never see anybody.
Can people visit your studio?
Oh, people can visit the studio for sure.
Oh, that's great. So you encourage them, or are you still with Nexus Gallery? Do you tend to push people there? No. So
no, I don't have any gallery here in Philadelphia anymore.
Okay. So really, it's all about come to my studio.
Yes.
Make it okay. So how do people get in touch with you to do this?
They call me on my cell.
Okay.
Or they send me an email at tishingersoll.com.
Okay.
tishingersoll@gmail.com, or they go to my website, and on my website I have an email.
Fantastic. Well, I'm always encouraging people to, reach out and ask artists questions, go to their studios, talk about the work, buy work directly from them. There's this weird thing where people don't feel that they should do that they have to go through a gallery or this or that. And I'm always, no, just reach out to the artist. So I'm thrilled to hear that you have a studio that people can come to. So
yes, and it's very safe.
If I'm visiting your studio, do I see you in it all the time? Are you always there in your studio, or do you?
I'm here maybe 4 days a week. I don't stay all day. I'm either here all morning or all afternoon. I can be here in the evening sometimes. It just depends on the responsibilities at home. But most of the time I'm here.
Can you handle people in your studio? Can you do work with other people in your studio, or do you need it like?
Oh God, no, I can't. I mean, if they're doing something else.
Okay. I'm always curious, one of the questions I love to ask is like, what studio rituals do you have? And a lot of times artists don't know what I'm talking about. I say, well, must the music be on? Must the door be shut? Must the, I spoke with an artist the other day. She said, well, before I begin, I have to have a cup of tea and a sandwich all the time. So for you, it's just go in and make, you don't need
I sometimes I come in and I've had so much discombobulation at home that I just go through my books or I sketch. I actually have a little booklet that has Yupo paper in it, and I do these very small abstract watercolors that I always have on the table here for me to kind of unwind when I come in.
A little bit.
Yeah. And they're really fun because on the Yupo paper, the watercolor just kind of sits on the top. And so when it dries, it's different from what I've started with.
Yeah, vellum does the same thing.
What?
Vellum does the same thing.
Yes, I love vellum.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, I love vellum.
Vellum and inks, or if you mix rubbing alcohol in with the inks.
Oh, I haven't done that.
Oh, it's great because it dries right away. That's a good one. So
thanks.
Tell me a little bit about your inspiration. You said that you have little sketchbooks. I'm curious to know, does inspiration come at you like a lightning bolt, or are you the kind of artist that that has to sort of build up to it?
It's both. I am very inspired by, right, especially right now, by cliffs and water. And when I went on my residencies in Ireland, my work changed dramatically because the landscape there was so dramatic where it was situated that it took over my body. I felt such passion for that landscape, and it's indescribable to me. It it inspires me so much that I can't explain it, and I feel just that way. I feel like I can't explain what it does to me, but it absolutely becomes a part of me. And when I'm in the studio, because I haven't been to Ireland since 2018, I find sometimes I need to look at the photographs that I took there because I took so many of this one cliff or this one sea stack that is a representation of history, memories of nature taking charge, that I need to look at it sometimes and I wish I were there. But other times I come into the studio and I'm scared to start a painting. And I have certain ways of starting my paintings. But it becomes intuitive as I'm working, and I end up spending times trying to relive that feeling, but other times it's just about the formal issues in the painting and just balance, color. Do I like the way that looks? And so I leave myself open to what happens. And I remember when I left my old studio in 2015 that I'd been in for 30 years, I had just reached a point in my work where I felt, and this sounds so weird, but I felt a part of the work as I was working. And I've gotten that, I've become more aware of that feeling again here in this studio. It took a while.
Well, anybody who follows your work, that that shift that you mentioned is very evident. So, as a matter of fact, your Ireland, that was a question of mine, was to ask you about it. But as you were talking about Ireland, clearly it did have a big shift on your work. I mean, I've seen it in the time that I've known you. But you mentioned something about starting your work in a specific way. Can you tell me what did you mean by that? Like,
Well, it's funny. It goes back and forth, and I'm not an artist who paints the same thing all the time, so it's hard to explain. Um, I mean, I start sometimes with an inspiration from a memory, and I'll draw in with paint, usually not with anything underneath. I'll put a form in that relates to the cliff or to the water or whatever, and then I will build on that. And for a while, I was doing very geometric forms, and I would use my my level and my tape. I always used blue tape or green tape to tape off shapes. And I've kind of this year, I mean, somebody on Instagram said, "Oh, you're doing more realistic images now or paintings now," and I said, "Well." Yes, I am. I guess I am, but I don't feel wedded to that. So it kind of starts with a shape, and then usually the horizon line is somewhere in there, and then sometimes I use my level to make a direction line go to the horizon line. And other times I just paint in some red. And then
When in doubt.
when in doubt, just put
Make it
that
paint
red
it
in.
red.
And that's kind of how I start.
So it's interesting that it sounds like you have like, for the current series that you're doing, they all have this sort of familiar starting point, whether it's a memory or whatnot, but then you just open it up and sort of
Yes.
see where your mind takes you, kind of a thing. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, my next question kind of dovetails into this, which is, how has your practice changed over time? Like, so when you first started making images when you got out of school, I assume you weren't at that point, taking a memory and then building on it. You were doing something completely different. So how has it changed over time? Is it?
Well, in the past, it was all observational, and I would be having to have something in front of me to paint from. Um, and I think that kind of changed in the 90s because I wanted to get away from, first of all, I'd already kind of let go of the still life, which actually taught me a lot about observation and color and light and shade. And in the 90s, I wanted to get away from straight landscape and not have it in front of me. And so I was trying to distill what it was about the landscape of Maine that I loved most. And I discovered then that it was the rocks and the rocks on my hikes that really, really inspired me. And what was happening with the rocks? The trees were growing out of the rocks. The roots were coming from below the rocks. And so I did a whole, and actually my Virginia residency, I would see vines wrapping around trees. And so I started drawing those things and they kind of got me away from feeling I had to observe them immediately. And I took risks in those works. And I feel like that was where I started to trust myself and what I'd learned from the academy and drawing from observation.
Well, I can, 9 out of 10 artists that I speak with, it always comes back to nature. It always comes back to the greatest teacher. So no matter whether you're painting, self-portraits or landscapes or complete abstractions, there's always that sort of tie that binds. So have you found, can you tell me if making images when you first started to now, is it, do you find that it's easier or harder, I would say, to make an image nowadays?
Oh, I don't want it to be too easy.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
then
if it's too easy, it's not worth it. Right. It's a struggle.
It's always hard to begin, and it's always hard to find meaning in it. I find that I question myself a lot about why am I doing this? Why am I
More
drawing?
now than before.
Yeah, before I didn't, I kind of knew, and I think it's because one's life becomes more complex, family-wise, and everything is just more complex, especially this past year.
I do find it's an indicator often for interesting artwork. If an artist really is introspective, if they're really looking, taking their time for images, I think I can read that in the artwork. I think that's what has attracted my own eye to your works, is I can see that there's these sort of hidden levels of stuff in it. So
Thank you.
keep going. What? So, so obviously, you're in the thick of it. You have a studio. You're constantly making work. So what would you say is the hardest part about being an artist nowadays?
justifying it. You know, there is so much pressure to sell or be recognized.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I started off, it was the idealistic time of, you know, I'm an artist. Wow. You know, that's enough. It's hard.
Everybody's an artist nowadays. I mean, the guy who
What?
made my sandwich for lunch is an artist. So
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that has no meaning.
yeah. No, it's hard in this climate to because people don't value the long years you've spent trying to be better, and you have a journey that you're taking, and Jack always has to remind me that this is part of my journey, because I forget sometimes that even if I'm not famous, I have something to give back.
Mhm.
And I think that my painting murals was a moment in my life where I really did give back.
Mhm.
And now that I'm in my studio more and I'm not working full time, I feel kind of guilty that I'm not selling or that I'm not promoting or whatever. But it is so hard to promote yourself now.
Oh yeah, there's so many. I find that it's difficult because so many people. There's so many platforms. So
Yes.
if I'm talking to a room full of people and they say, "Well, you know, I don't hear about you," it's like, well, that's, you know, this person's on Facebook, but this one's on Instagram, and this one doesn't do a computer at all. So it's
Yeah.
hard to get your message out. So
Yes.
speaking of message and you know your value as an artist, we just finished up 2020, which I think we can all agree was not the most spectacular of years.
Mhm.
But do you have any highlights for 2020?
Well, my hikes, my
Oh,
walking,
all
my
right.
walking, and my being in the studio more because our studio is quite safe. Very few people come here, and we all wore masks, have been wearing masks. It's down a dead end street.
Well, that's good.
Um,
So you're saying that 2020 was the year of fodder for you. You know, like you
yes,
packed
yes,
your brain full of new stuff.
yes, and learning. I started in Maine last fall, or this past fall. We have a fantastic library in the town where we go, and they had this course that you could take. You know, it was a DVD of a man, a professor down in university, not the University of Virginia, but a university in Virginia. I can't remember the name, and his name it was Professor Renton, and it's a geology course. So I started taking this course because I thought I'm painting rocks and cliffs. I should understand more. And
Research.
his whole thing was, and he unfortunately died in February. Um, that if you know about the composition of the rocks and the minerals that are take part in, you know, are a part of all this, then you come to appreciate it so much more when you're out in on your hikes or your walks.
Yeah.
And that I wouldn't have done. I haven't finished it. I ended up buying his entire course on eBay. And I haven't, you know, I haven't begun to begin, you know, to finish it. That's really been wonderful to have time to do that.
So what are you currently working on? Is anything behind you brand
Um,
new?
this is one that I did last year that I put up because I changed it so many times.
Good.
And it evolved from a watercolor that I had started quite a while ago, which I won't leave the screen and show it to you, but I'm not working on that anymore. But this one, wait a minute, this one is kind of the direction I'm going in. I think And the only reason is because Jack and other people have said, don't do anything more to that. And what I was doing was outlining with a thin brush with black, kind of describing the rock formation of that Downpatrick Head. And then I'd already painted in color, so they don't overlap often. And so there's blue from the ocean showing through, and then the rock colors. And I think it's a freer way for me to work, but it's not easy. It's you know, I want to finish it. And I always have one or two, and actually I'm working on a small one now that I started doing that with purple. And I kept saying to myself, this is not working. This is not working. I have tried so many times to make this composition work, and, you know, kept adding and subtracting and adding. And then I did the lines, and a good friend who I send images to, she said, don't do anything more. It describes the complexities of these times.
Nice.
And
That's what you want.
okay, I'll take it. I'll take
So
it.
I'd love to encourage you, if not already, the people watching this video would love to see details of those. Can I get you to maybe post them on Instagram or something?
Sure, sure.
Great. You know, this medium only is so
Yeah.
far that people can actually see.
Yeah.
So, that would be great. So I've got really just sort of one more big question for you that I was curious to know. If this is sort of a wish scenario, if resources were unlimited to you, you know, you didn't have to worry about sales, you didn't have to worry about anything, you know, you could triple the size of your studio, plenty of money. Would you take on a new project? Is there anything that you've ever thought about that I'd love to do, but that, you know, I just can't swing it? Or do you think your work would stay the same?
Oh, I hope not.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I'd like to travel more. And
More fodder. Is that what more fodder, more
fodder.
yeah.
I'd like to have the strength to do larger work. I actually, behind this painting, I have canvas, which I don't usually work on. I work on paper. I would like to get back to some more risky paintings, but you know, I'm not sure. I think I'd like to do some collaborative work. Maybe again with Jack. We did some collaborative work in the past that were installations. But it's so expensive to do that kind of thing.
Well, I'd love to ask this question because artists tend to have so many different ideas. I've talked to some artists and they're like, no, I'm doing the work that I've always wanted to do now. And other people are like, well, no, I would like to do larger. I'd do a series of woodcuts, or I'd farm it out and have somebody print it for me or something. So, well,
I had before COVID began, I was using the resources at PAFA for printing. And I had a wonderful teacher there, Lisa Hamilton, and I was learning silk screening. And that seemed to be something that I would like to go back to. We were also, thanks to one of my colleagues at PAFA, doing illustrations for the Spoon River anthology as etchings. And so I'd gotten back into printing, you know, in 2017. And I really enjoyed that. And I would like to get back to that, but it seems impossible right now.
Well, you and I need to talk. I'm a huge lover of printmaking, and there's do it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You and I will need to have more conversations about this.
Yeah.
So, Gee, just talking to you, I now have like another dozen questions I need to ask you. So maybe we can do a part 2 of this whole thing. But I wanted to thank you very much. Looks like our time is up. I want to thank you very much for coming today and for talking to us about your studio.
Thank you.
Again, I want to encourage everybody out there to make sure to go to Tish's website, check out her work, ask questions. There's always ways to contact the artist. Arrange for a studio visit. Probably when COVID's over, but arrange for a studio visit and make sure to go out and support. And again, I also want to thank everybody who not only tuned in this evening, but for those who made donations to the center. Allens Lane Art Center is a cornerstone of the Northwest Philadelphia arts community, and we thank you for your support. Thanks again for tuning in, and have a great evening.
Bye. Thank you, Craig.
You're welcome.